both of those two manoeuvres are fraught with difficulty, particularly when you've got a hung parliament tugging in all sorts of different directions.
Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has asked Michel Barnier to stay on as caretaker prime minister after he lost that vote of no confidence. The president of the National Assembly announced those results last night, 331 votes in favour of ousting Barnier, which was way beyond the 288 required. And the Élysée Palace has confirmed that Barnier and his ministers will remain in office until a new PM is named. We can talk to Nina Dos Santos, the international correspondent and commentator. Hello, Nina.
Hi there, John.
Hi. Nina, can you get us up to date then with this rolling crisis and what you expect Macron might say when he addresses the country this evening?
Well, he's going to make this televised address, and you can bet that lots of French people will be tuning in because 10 million of them, nearly 15% of the population, tuned into his own former prime minister's address. Michel Barnier, just a couple of days ago, on the eve of that no confidence vote that obviously went very badly for him. We're expecting, although it is not at all assured, that the president may well already nominate Michel Barnier's successor when he hits the airwaves at 8 p.m. local time in France. Who could any of those candidates be? Well, some of the names that are being floated around, including the 39-year-old Armed Forces Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, who is very much, the type of person who Emmanuel Macron likes. He's young, he's dynamic, he's been an ally for a long time, or even perhaps somebody who's more or less the same age and from a similar sort of political generation as Michel Barnier, François Bayrou, who is, however, more of a centrist. But I suppose, as you'd say in French, plus ça change, because the problems themselves in the long run are not going to go away, and whoever is the next PM of France is still going to have a hard time passing any budget.
Well, they're just going to inherit the very precise same deadlock that left Barnier out.
Yeah, they are. Because essentially, Emmanuel Macron, when he called those snap elections in the summer, what he was trying to do was torpedo the support that the far right had managed to get in the European parliamentary elections that were earlier on in the summer. He didn't really manage to do that, though. What he was left with was a weaker position for his own centrist movement that had already lost its majority in the previous set of parliamentary elections in France. And the Parliament has been hung ever since, and it's split in three big broad blocks that can't seem to agree, particularly when it comes to financials, on anything in particular, though they did ally to oust Barnier. First time any prime minister in France has been ousted since 1962. So it really is a very significant moment that everybody outside of France is also, on tenterhooks about.
Right. So you've got a deadlock in the National Assembly, three blocks, as you say, left, right and centre. There's no sign whatever of them agreeing, one with either of the others, to work together. So on goes the deadlock. I mean, what can happen now? I mean, you need that deadlock to be resolved one way or another, and you can't have another general election within a year. That's what the Constitution says. So I guess the pressure's on, isn't it, from Le Pen and others to try to force Emmanuel Macron to resign the presidency and have a presidential election. But he shows no sign at all of wanting to do that.
That's exactly right. He says that no, he doesn't need to resign until 2027 when his mandate is up. Also, members of his own party, like François Bayrou, who I mentioned before, one of the names that's being floated about as a possible successor to Michel Barnier, he says, well, look, the worst thing that the country could do at the moment is actually get rid of the stability that the president offers, that anybody who's asking for his demise should be punished in the future politically, because it would just exacerbate this crisis. And that is essentially what you're going to expect the centrist and perhaps some of the more moderate members of the left, like the socialists, to start to argue here, that if the parties from France Unbowed, which is the hard left, and the National Rally, which is the hard right, continue to disagree and don't allow any other government to push through any budgets or even ad hoc measures to try and fund the civil service for the next few months, that they should bear the consequences of that. Having said that, though, John, the calculation they're probably making is, why help Macron now? I can make it really difficult for him in the next few months. And come July, when there are new parliamentary elections, nobody's going to blame me. I can get them to vote for me because I stood up against a budget that would have made the living standards for French people worse at a cost of living crisis time, when they're obviously worried about every euro in their pocket.
Well, what about the government, though, of the country, Nina, while this stalemate goes on? I mean, how far can France go on muddling through with no budget?
It's a huge problem, not just for France, because obviously it's an enormous economy with 68, even more than 68 million citizens. Lots of them work for the state and they're going to need to be paid pretty soon. So whoever forms the next government, even over the next couple of months, will probably have to start passing emergency ad hoc legislation to pay for the civil service. You know, the civil service and state expenditure is a huge part of the French economy, much bigger than here in the UK. And also, there's pensions to pay and all sorts of other things to do, including collect taxes. So they're going to have to probably start to muddle through by passing elements of what would have been a budget. The question is whether or not they're going to be able to, in 2025, at least the first half of 2025, pass any kind of budget at all. Now, one thing that's crucial to remember that precipitated this whole issue is that France passes a budget in two components. The first part is a welfare budget, which is the immediate bit that they have to try and sort out now. And then later on, they also pass another part of the budget for more expenditure on the state. Both of those two maneuvers are fraught with difficulty, particularly when you've got a hung parliament tugging in all sorts of different directions.
Okay, let's just imagine for a moment that that Macron gives into the pressure, not doing that as far as we can see, but imagine that he did. Who would be best placed to come out on top in the fight for the presidency? Are we talking about the National Rally and Marine Le Pen's party?
This is a really difficult question, and it goes right to the heart of the question that you were asking me before, whether or not really the objective of some of these parties on the left and right that are being so vocal against any government Macron is going to nominate, like Barnier's, is that essentially they want to grab power, not the power of the premiership, because really French prime ministers only deal with domestic matters, but they want the presidency, which is the whole lot, if you like, domestic matters and foreign affairs and so on and so forth. And that is really what Marine Le Pen in particular is after here. It's very, very clear. She also, however, has an incentive to try and go for it early and try and push him out for two reasons. One, she's facing some legal travails that could knock her out of any 2027 presidential race when Macron can't run again. That is because she's facing some embezzlement and corruption charges alongside other members of her party in a long-running case that could see her disbarred from office, even if she appeals at the first stage. So it's in her incentive to try and push for the presidency earlier rather than later. And the other issue is that various opinion polls have been conducted ever since those snap elections in the summer, and they just go to show that more and more of the French people are against Macron himself. His own personal brand is becoming toxic. I think the latest poll suggested something like 60% or more of French citizens thought that really, even if the constitution says he can stay on until the end of his mandate, he should really go because he made such a bad decision to precipitate those elections that have fractured the French political system and brought it to this impasse that it's in today.
Right. Nina, thank you. Nina Dos Santos there. Let's keep in touch as this story develops. Now, coming up in a moment, latest on